Hey there. I guess I can do away with this. I don't think I can pass it this way. I pray. So I'm Vince Pellegrini. I own Southern Trust Real Estate here on Venice Island. I'm making this video because over the last few weeks I've heard quite a bit of information, misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, about our local real estate market as it pertains to Venice Island and Venice in general. So I figured I would take you on a journey, a deep dive into the statistics, and hopefully give you a little bit of peace and settle you a little bit in these unsettled times. So hopefully this brings some value. Hopefully you enjoy it. And next we're going to jump into some screen sharing. So you're going to see a very small picture of me in the corner, then you're going to see my computer screen, and I'm going to take you through the statistics. See you in a second.
Okay, so before we get started and you try to start figuring out this chart on my screen, let me explain what we're looking at. We're going back 2 years so I can explain, so I can articulate one point, and that is, yes, our market is very seasonal, but it's not as seasonal as some think. Number one, there are a number of transactions that go on in June and July, but we're going back 2 years and we're looking at total sales on Venice Island per month. It's a good way to take a snapshot of activity, the amount of total sales that happen in a given month. We can kind of, it's one look into the health of the market. So what I want to share is that April, by and large, is our best month, pretty much 8 years out of 10. Can usually count on April transactions being head and shoulders. There being head and shoulders more transactions in April than any other month of the year. And that's really because of the seasonality of our market. There's a lot of activity that goes on here, and then it culminates in transactions towards the end of the season. Hopefully that makes sense. So to further illustrate that point, we're going to jump over to 2019. So we went 2 years back to 2018, and that we looked at April. And I'm doing this for a reason, so just bear with me. So now we're going to jump to 2019, and you're going to see more of the same if my computer cooperates. Come on. Okay, so back to April. Again, head and shoulders more transactions than any other month in the year for 2019. So that's last year. Now, hold that thought. I want you to remember what this looks like, and then I want you to take a look at this year. So we're going to look at year to date. So last year we had right around 50 transactions in April. Now, when we go to this year, you'll see in April we had just over 20 transactions. Based on the huge March that we had, which is 40 and change closings in March on the island, we would have expected to see a huge April. So maybe somewhere around 60 transactions, and we saw 20. So that's 1/3. Here's the good news. That demand, those would-be buyers, that doesn't just evaporate. The sun's still shining. We still have warm winters, and people are still moving to this area. So, yes, we had a huge drop-off in transactions, but those would-be buyers didn't just evaporate. And I'm going to continue to show more information to support this point, but what we saw was a market pause and not a market crash. And we're going to talk more about that. Those buyers, those would-be buyers, that demand is going to rebound. And we're starting to see that in our brokerage. Our agents are more busy. Our phones are more busy. People are flying in town to look at properties, even that already left town. They're flying back in to look. We're starting to see that buzz coming back. So that should be reassuring. That's also not just my opinion. If you do some general Google searches on what they say is going to go on in the third and fourth quarter of 2020, they say that the anticipation is that overall for the year, our transactions may be down, but there is going to be a big rebound from these transactions that we lost out on here. So I want to dig into these numbers a little bit more to give you a point of reference of what we're seeing. So we had a big March. March is typically due to February activity. So the activity was going on here. People were looking at homes, putting in offers, getting deals under contract, and then they end up closing in March. So a lot of this March transaction volume was based on February activity. Something to note is right at the end of February, depending on which indexes you're looking at, February 22nd to the 24th is really when the bottom of the stock market fell out. So the fact that the stock market fell out, and we still ended up having a decent March, well, I mean, a really strong March is a lot to do with February activity, but also more cash transactions and things like that still happened in March. That should be very reassuring. We start to see that slowdown of, so now we go to April. So we talked about April being about a third of the transactions that we should have expected. That goes back to March activity. So a lot of that is going to be the contraction and the nerves that happen from one, the virus, and two, the stock market, the bottom falling out of the stock market. So that's really what we're seeing reflected in April. Now we get to April. So April activity was very light, depending on who you're asking, what was essential, what was not essential. Searching for a second home, vacation home, retirement home. That's a lot of what our market is. Most wouldn't deem that essential, and so you're gonna, if people were wearing masks, etc., people weren't going to open houses, what have you. We were shelter in place based on the governor's orders. So that's a lot of what you're seeing in April, but also a lot of what you're starting to translate into May. That being said, we're only 6 days into May. We already have 5 transactions. If you extrapolate that out and you just average those numbers out, it ends up somewhere in the high. It should end up somewhere in the high 20s, maybe around 30 transactions. If you go back to the last 2 years, that's right about normal, which is astounding to me, based on the fact that people were supposed to be inside last month and they shouldn't be putting contracts on properties. So that should be good news. That should be reassuring that even ahead of our economy fully opening back up in the state of Florida, we're already seeing the potential of transactions in May being back to normal, to what we saw the last couple of years. So again, myself, the community in large, I think I can speak with some matter of authority. We believe that those would-be buyers, that all those closings that should have happened in April, and should have happened again in May, that based on, it should have been stronger than the last 2 years based on our March. That's going to swell. So that's good. There seems like there's going to be some rumblings of some rebounding demand. As a property owner on Venice Island, that should be 2 thumbs up for you. That should be something that is a little bit of peace and a little bit of settling in some times where we have very little of that. So what else? What else do we want to know? We're saying that May already shows signs of coming back, and market activity is coming back in brokerages. What else? Did people wholesale their properties? Did people panic sell their properties on Venice Island over the last couple of months? And did that affect the value of your property? Or is that going to affect the value of your property going forward? And the answer, by and large, to that question is no. So what we're looking at here, and let me explain this again, this is all of the solds that happened in about the last month. And the number that we're looking at here, to answer that question that I just addressed, are people panic selling? Are people wholesaling properties because of panic? This number is the percentage difference between what people are asking for a property and then what they're selling the property for. So it's that gap. So in last month, property sold for about 95% what they were on the market for. Is that normal? What does that number mean? Well, we can go back to last year. This is 2019, and we look, and that number sits at identical. So there wasn't this huge whole shot, people wholesaling property, people panic selling. Again, this should be good news for you as a property owner on Venice Island. So again, hopefully this settles you a little bit. People weren't wholesaling property, which is great for you. So if we're saying demand is on the come up and people weren't wholesaling properties affecting the value of your property, what else do we care about as far as the health of the market? Well, we talked about demand. How about supply? So let's take a quick look at what supply looks like. The number that we look at for supply is total active listings. If I'm a buyer in the marketplace, how many options do I have? So this number right here is May. That's right now. How many listings are available on Venice Island? 195. Without any context, that may sound like a lot. Wow, there's almost 200 homes for sale, or homes and condos for sale on Venice Island. But if you zoom out and you actually look at the data, That's the lowest inventory we've had in over 3 years. You can go back to 2017, end of 2016. There's never been less than 195 homes on the market. So we have a rebounding of demand. We have prices that didn't take a huge whack. We have the lowest inventory we've had in greater than 3 years. These are all strong market conditions. So everything that I've talked about so far has been hyper localized to Venice Island. But if we zoom out a little bit and we talk about where we are right now with demand rebounding, prices not taking a big hit, and inventory being low, those are strong times for property value and strong times to be selling a property. Now, one thing that is a possible influence to that going forward is the fact that, and one of the things that I want to make you aware, if you do have some concept of selling in the near future, is that we're in an election year. And typically, as we go down the campaign trail and we get closer and closer to the election, people get more and more conservative. There's a little bit, I don't mean politically conservative, I mean fiscally conservative. And you start to see less and less more and more people holding onto their purse strings and less extraneous spending. So that could have an influence on our market, especially given the fact that people are thinking about there could be potential tax reform and different implications if there is some type of change in Washington. So factor to keep in mind, right now we have demand rebounding. We have prices that didn't take a big hit. We have low supply, low inventory, all good things for property value. So, and we believe that that demand is going to rebound across this summer. The fall is the heavy campaign trail. That's when the uncertainty, that's when people hold their purse strings. So if you're thinking of selling in the near future, this could be a pretty solid time to do so. So hopefully this information was reassuring to you. Hopefully this information settled you a little bit in the settling time. The island and Venice in general is very complex. In different pockets of the island, I could be telling a completely different story. This is general information. If you have information about your property in particular, if you want information specifically about like the northwest quadrant of Venice Island, just the streets that are just walking distance to downtown, how are these micro markets being affected? My phone number's in the email that you got to this video from. Please reach out to me, ask me questions. This is my job. This is what I love to do. Glad to get that information for you. So hopefully this was helpful. I look forward to servicing either you or your family in the near future, and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.